Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Education Matters with Jim O'Connell.
And education does matter.
Yes, it does. And I'm joined tonight for a few minutes by Glenn Ouellette, former candidate for mayor on a number of occasions. And Glenn is joining us to talk about an event that he and a committee is involved in are staging. So I've just heard about this. So let's hear what's going on,
Okay.
Glenn.
We are the Citizens Committee on Economic Development, and we want to have a well-rounded city. Economic development doesn't only mean jobs.
Right.
It means education, it means entertainment, it means everything. So we're celebrating the city's birthday for the first time since 1996. That's 22 years ago.
And that's because that was the 150th.
Yes, but the average city around the country celebrates its city, or at least recognizes its birthday. We don't recognize our birthday.
What do we use for a birth date? What do we use for the date? I mean, we have the year, but what do we use for a date?
We have a date.
We
It
do?
took a lot of digging, but
Yeah.
remember, the state had to accept the seal because that's how the state runs.
Okay.
So it was June 1st, 1846.
June 1st. All right.
And
okay.
this year it lands on a Friday, so we're having our first event, our first big event as a committee, and we're holding it at City Hall Plaza,
What was the name of the committee again?
Citizens Committee for Economic Development.
Okay.
Our aim is to move the city forward.
Okay.
And so we're going to have this,
You have a poster to hold
There's
up
a
there
poster
if
to
people
hold
can
up.
see it.
and the celebration starts at 6:30 until 10 p.m. There'll be we hired a jazz band that belong to our high schools, and they
Oh yeah, is
they-
that the
they-
kid? Yeah, the kids.
the Queen City Combo Jazz Band.
yeah,
They
they're
created-
excellent.
They created their own jazz band. They're still in high school. They come from
Yeah.
different high schools in the
Yep,
city.
they're excellent. I've
And
heard
they
them.
are excellent. And the whole thing is if you're going to celebrate the city's birthday, it's going to be celebrating the citizens. So we want to involve all ages,
Okay.
all ethnics. We are a diverse city. Let's be proud of our city.
So you're starting at 6 o'clock and
6:30.
6:30. Okay, because it says I was just saying it said 6 on your poster, but so 6:30. You're starting at 6:30.
6:30 to 10.
Okay, just down here it says 6, but that's might be a
6:30
misprint.
to
So
10.
at 6:30, that's all right. People can go and have a coffee and be ready standing there by 6:30.
Yeah.
So at 6:30, you're going to, what's going to happen?
The jazz band will play for a half hour.
Okay,
And
nice.
at 7 o'clock is when we're actually going to unveil the beginning of the celebration.
Alrighty.
We have speakers. Our main speaker is, we call him Mr. Manchester, John Clayton, who will
course.
speak on the history of Manchester from 1846 to 2018. Who better to speak on the history than John Clayton?
Not a better man to be had. You're right.
And we have Senator Lou D'Alessandro and other speakers as well. The committee will speak also on its vision for our city and our schools.
Okay.
And then we're going to have a more music. Oh, we have invocation prayers with different religious groups, and they will do it in their language, and their youth groups will be singing in English and their language.
Nice.
And then
Okay.
we're going to have a movie about half hour on the history of Manchester. And then at the end, we're
Where's
going.
that coming from? Where's that movie going to be cut? Where?
Some of it comes from Paul Cormier, who does a lot of that stuff.
Oh yeah. I've seen
And
it before.
some of it comes from the Manchester Historical Museum that Clayton
Okay.
is the
Yeah,
director
John's
of.
the director of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have fireworks at the end on film that we created ourselves through a software. So it'll be fireworks that you don't normally see when they're real fireworks.
Yeah.
And we put it to violin, and you'll still hear the boom booms. And it'll be great. And then we're going to end with prayers, and then the Queen City Combo Jazz Band, as you leave, will play for the next half hour.
All right. Wonderful.
So it's small. The next year it'll land on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So we're going to do, for the first time in maybe 30 years, we're going to do a one-day festival at Veterans Park because it lands on a
Nice.
Saturday.
Okay.
It's time we celebrate our city
On
and
June
tell the
1st.
criminals that we will gather downtown as crowds and we will be safe and you will go away because we outnumber you.
Yeah, I take that as a given anyway because I was downtown a couple of times this weekend for various things. I was at the parade on Monday, another wonderful event.
It was very good. I was there. I filmed it.
And you know, I don't I never have a problem being downtown. I go
Neither do
downtown.
I find the downtown very safe, Jim.
Yeah. So I don't. Yeah. So anyway, that's fine. So maybe you want to tell me just a quick. I'm interested in the committee. So this is a committee that you and a group of friends set up, or
Not friends.
Or people.
People from all over the city. Where they're.
How long ago was this? Like when was it
We
set up?
started March 26th. We
Okay.
talked about it since January. We finally got it going. Our first meeting was March 26th.
All right.
We meet twice a month, except in June, July, and August. We meet once a month, then we go back twice a month.
Nice.
What we're doing is it's made up of the board's made up of three categories.
Okay.
Category 1 is the 4 elected officials from the main memberships: the chairman, the vice chairman, the secretary, and treasurer.
Okay. Are you the chairperson?
I am the chairperson.
Okay, yep.
And I can only be chairperson for 2 years. We have bylaws and we follow our bylaws.
good,
You know,
good.
it's not about me.
Yes.
It's about our city.
Okay.
And,
And,
then the second category, there are 24 members, 2 from each ward.
Okay.
So in September, when we start doing ward city town meetings, which will be citizens town meetings, they will represent their ward. They're from that ward.
I see.
Who better to know their own wards? And then the other 5 are we call them specialty members. They some are engineers, some know how the city runs, some are lawyers, some are corporations in the city.
Right.
So we have a well-rounded committee of 33 people.
And if people wanted to contact you or help out or support or whatever, how
We're looking for help for volunteers to put on the celebration on Friday anyway. So if you want to help us set up,
Yeah.
5 o'clock till 6 o'clock.
if people wanted to contact you, how do they do that?
603
603
289
289
6835.
6835.
Or we have a web. We don't have a website. We have a. We will, but we have a email, and the email is Queen City Citizens with
Yeah.
an S at the end
Yeah.
at gmail.com. Contact us, and we will contact you.
All right. Perfect. Well, Glenn, thank you for coming in. And,
You're welcome. And don't forget Friday at 6:30, and come enjoy. It's supposed to be 85 degrees on Friday. Come enjoy a great evening of fun as a city.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks for coming in, Glenn. I appreciate it.
welcome.
All right, folks. There you have it. So, we'll be back in just 1 minute. Thank you. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was the Glenn Ouellette, who was here to talk about a celebration that he's organizing, as you heard, on June 1st for the 172nd birthday of our city. So, ladies and gentlemen, the call-in number here is 603, of course, 640-3091. You're very welcome to call in. If you're watching this on Tuesday evening, then you're watching it live. It's the 29th of May, and who knew? But the year is almost out already. Just with regard to that, we have, of course, the graduation for our high schools coming up in less than 2 weeks now at the SNU Arena, which is always a great celebration of kids in our city, and then the last day of school for let me see what it says here. Last day of school for pre-K kids is June 8th. Last day of school for kindergartners through grade 11 is June 15th, and of course high school commencements or graduations, as the language I like to use, is on June 9th at the SNU Arena. So and then with regard to that, I have to say that I was happy to be at the parade in Manchester on Monday, and it was wonderful to see all the schools from our city. The 3 high schools, or actually MST was represented there with their robotics team, I believe. but each of the bands from West and Central and Memorial were there, sounding great, looking great. And then what was really nice to see was the four middle schools, Parkside, Southside, McLaughlin, and Hillside, represented, because those younger kids in grade 6, 7, and 8 don't have as many opportunities to be seen out and about in the city. And I think, generally speaking, that it would be nice to see some of those bands more often than we see them currently. I know that Alderman O'Neill brought up the fact that the last aldermanic meeting that the St. Patrick's Day Committee had tried for some time to try and get the high school bands to march, but only one per year was the agreement they had reached eventually. But I don't know the inner workings of that. If anybody knows, I'd love to hear. Again, 640-3091. But it was wonderful to see them, and in particular, I have to single out at Central High School, just because Mr. Sterling, the band director and music teacher there, he's been, I think, about 20 years or 22 years. I'm sorry, I apologize for not having looked up the full number, the proper number, the accurate number before this, but he's been there a long time. He's retiring. This is his last hurrah, and so on Monday, Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Sorry, Memorial Day was his last time marching down Elm Street after having done it at the front or side or back of that band for many years. So congratulations to Mr. Sterling. There is a concert, a benefit concert in his honour, planned for the early part of June. For anybody who would like to show their support to him. But it was wonderful to see the young people marching down, and I think it was Manchester West, but I could be, maybe I shouldn't have singled out West. One of the bands anyway. It was wonderful to see the inclusion there. There was a young person in a wheelchair who was playing their instrument and being pushed along with the band, and so all those little things. If people want to know how money is being spent in Manchester and the great things that our schools are doing, being on Elm Street yesterday and watching our what was seven bands, 4 from the middle schools and 3 from the high schools. Marching down Elm Street was a heartwarming thing, and it's great that despite all the challenges and despite lots of things, and despite the naysayers, the city is still able to turn this out. And with respect to Glenn Roulette, who was here a minute ago, and the celebration of the 172nd birthday of the city. I think it's important that the city takes some pride in its schools and in its children, and that was a great example of seeing that. I have to say that more generally, it will be yesterday was a beautiful day, and I know it's a long weekend, so people are away and things like that. But it would be great to see a bigger crowd than was there. I think the crowd was okay, but it wasn't. There's room for a lot more, and you see the same faces there year after year. And I often think, I see some veterans walking by, many of them being driven by in cars, and as a generation passes, I think that a society, a community owes it to our veterans to come out and show respect. I'm glad the school district is able to do it. I wish that more people would come out for it, though, and perhaps a better job should be done of announcing it or something. I'm not sure, but it was wonderful to see. The school board. There's a school board meeting on tonight, and of course which will be on after this show. So if you're watching this on channel 23, if you switch to channel 22 at 7 p.m. at the end of this program, you'll be able to watch the school board meeting live. We're in the middle of the budget issue still. We don't know what the budget is going to be. The most recent news is that the aldermen have asked the school district, i.e., in this case, the superintendent, to come back with broken down in chunks of by like hundred thousands, 100,000 for this, 100,000 for that. That what might they get, so to speak, if they gave this amount or that amount or another amount. So I'm not sure where that's going to go. That's where it sits right now. I think it's an awful idea. I understand why aldermen want to do this, because they want to be able to say, well, we did whatever it was. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is this: is that the school district, it's not a question of, you know, a choice between wishes, things we'd like to do. These things are all necessary for in order for the school district to be successful. And the fact that, in the face of knowing that our school district spends less per student than every other city in the state of New Hampshire, and the fact that we have the least number of teachers per student of every city and town and district in the state of New Hampshire, that despite that, we still want to go in as a city and we want to piecemeal it out to see what little piece can we be able to point at and say we did this. And I had a fundamental argument with people on the more liberal side of our politics last year, have had many years, but last year around this very topic, which was, you know, the bottom line was they were not going to fund the school district. They knew the school district was not funded properly. They don't agree with the tax cap. They know that it has been a bad thing for our schools. They know that our school, because our schools have issues. We have an issue economically and an issue with attracting families to the city, etc. And despite that, they're going to go along to get along because they don't want to lose their seats. So what they were looking for was, you know, give me something like a $50,000 program or something that we could write it to say, look, you know, as the alderman, we funded this additional program. So when some city resident walks up to them and says, how come we have a shortage of this, that, or the other thing, and we don't have, they'll say, oh, we did this one thing. So it's all, the bottom line is they won't deal with it. I had my friend on here last week, and he was here for a little while. He came in late, or not that he was late, he didn't have an appointment, but I was happy that he was able to come in. Ross Terrio. And Ross was here, and we kind of got, at the end of that program, it all got crunched down and we ran out of time. But, you know, my point to Ross, and he knows he's welcome here anytime to address this again, but, you know, he knows full well that our school district is not receiving the resources that it requires. I don't put any words in his mouth. I think he knows that. He also just last week, whether it made it on air or it was part of the piece we spoke about after the camera stopped rolling, you know, said that clearly in the city of Manchester, that the percentage of money from the total amount of taxes collected in the centre in the city of Manchester, that the percentage that we spend on schools is much less as a percentage than the percentage spent by other communities on their schools. And of course, what is equally true is that the amount we spend on general city services is much larger than what other towns and cities spend on. But frankly, as a resident and taxpayer in the city, I do care about it. But for the purposes of this conversation, and because we're talking about schools, I don't care to talk about the second half. I don't want to talk about whether we should reduce firemen or whether we should have police officers have to, you know, walk up and down and not have their cars 2 weeks a year or something. Whatever stupid nonsense these people who want to hold the line would propose. I don't want to be dragged into those areas. I want to talk about the fact that I have my friend here, Ross Terrio, a Conservative Republican member of the school board, who will sit here and recognise that and admit that our school district is not funded well enough, that it's underfunded compared to other towns, and yet is stuck without an answer, because even when we get to there, we can't get to the next step about, well, then what should we do about it? Because, and that's something I'd like to visit with him in due course as we as we go through this. But we'll see what happens with the budget. I would suggest calling your members of the school board and the board of mayor and aldermen and tell them to adequately fund our schools. Last year, Dr. Vargas asked for, or the school board asked for an additional 2 million. Not 2 million, let's be very clear, right? 2 million over what the tax cap allowed. And they found 2 million without breaking the tax cap. And the 2 million was spent in the way in which the school board promised that it would spend it. And so improvements were made or things were put back that had been taken away. And the premise was that we want to remove the argument from people in the city that says, oh, you give money to the school board and they just witter it away. They'll tell you they're going to spend it on this, but they don't. They actually spend it on something else. Well, the lie was put to that last year. So now the question for the aldermen is, will you fund the things that our school district needs, or will you not? And clearly, the needs of the school district are clear in certain areas. When we look at we had Manchester Proud a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the proposal to write yet another strategic plan for the city of Manchester, and despite the previous strategic plan was to last from 2013 to 2018, not a single one of the 5 goals was met. And so, as I pointed out previously, my worry, while I think it's exciting to have the members of the business community and the education community and the citizens of Manchester and all the different parts of the city come along in a large and diverse group, creating this Manchester Proud and saying we're going to move our city forward and create a strategic plan and then find a way of... So the real issue will be in ensuring that the strategic plan is met. And what I would like to see, contrary to what we saw for the last 5 years, so the previous 5-year plan, which just finishes this year, the goals weren't met. And there have to be some teeth in this plan. So, for instance, under the previous plan, we had the goal of achieving let me see what is it, by the end of the year 17-18, the achievement gap in reading between students with disabilities and students without disabilities will be reduced by 6% as measured by the state and district. So if you find you haven't met that was one of the benchmarks of the goal. The goal was that from the 2013 school year, by the end of 17-18 school year, the percentage of students proficient or above in reading at each grade level as measured by state and district assessments will increase by 20 percentage points. And then the benchmarks were broken down by a certain percentage in each of the different groups, etc. Those things weren't met. Where the teeth come from is that if that happened to be, if you were to not bother with a strategic plan, just take the one that existed for the last 5 years and say, here, 5 years later than planned, we're going to implement meet the goals that we set up 5 years ago. And then when it comes to the budget, like this budget season right now, when an alderman, or more importantly a school board member, votes in favor of reducing the number of teachers who are doing remedial English work, then there should be a consequence to that, and should be pointed out to them that, this is a goal we all agreed on, we put in place. This vote that's in front of you is what we should be doing is adding resources in that area so that we improve things, and you want to take them away. At some point, there has to be some reason to force people to make what might be otherwise unpopular decisions with their constituents, because I see us in some senses, like a mouse on a wheel here, stuck in the same conversations going round and round and round. We have those people in the city of Manchester who do not support public schools, and they don't, they're up in Concord voting against our schools, etc. So it shouldn't be surprising to us. They don't believe in the whole enterprise, and so how do you get people like that to actually switch their votes? No, I don't despair, because if I despaired, I wouldn't be here. Um, I'm all over the place here, but I want to touch off something else that we ran out of time on, ran out of time on last week, and that's the issue of health care for school board and members of the board, mayor and aldermen. And this is a position that I've been brought to over time, and Phil Sapienza called up about this last week when Ross Terrier was on the show, and we ran out of time. But I think the point is actually a very simple one now. When I first looked at this some years ago, my thought was, it's almost like an annoyance. It's like, it's not fundamental to let's do it or don't do it. It's not going to change, the number of bums in seats and the number of teachers and the condition of our schools and what we have for programs and all the rest of it. And that's where I was. And but I agree today on the point that there's something terribly flawed about a school system where we have children who are coming from some of them coming from families who are in extreme need, where we have kids who are homeless, where we have kids who are from families that have been impacted by all kinds of social ills, where we don't have the money to do some of the basic things we need to do for some of our kids. To have that situation go on in our schools, where we are reducing the number of teachers on an annual basis, and despite that, we are giving gold star health care to what are elected officials. And the more I've thought about this, and the more I've been pushed in that direction, I would say, but I don't need to be pushed anymore, I'm fully there. There's something really wrong when a person who is a member of the school board or board mayor and alderman, who perhaps, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, because I don't know if these set of facts meet any one person, I hope they don't, but somebody who owns their own home, has a holiday home at the sea coast or up at Killington, Vermont or something, has investment properties in Manchester or elsewhere, who by any set of measurements is a well-to-do person. The fact that the taxpayers of Manchester are paying for that person's health care while the poorest of the children in the city go without, that's just wrong. It's unconscionable, and as was pointed out by Mrs. Sapienza, the answer was very simple: just don't do it. I don't understand the rationale for moving forward with it. It's a legacy thing that was inherited, so let's just get rid of it. If it's only, as some claim, 100,000, 150,000 or something a year, then that's 2 to 3 teachers. Roughly about $50,000 a teacher. By the way, 35 income, 15 in benefits. So we're talking about a full number of about 50,000 per teacher for a new teacher, a newly minted teacher coming into the district. So 150 would be 3 teachers. I got to tell you, 3 teachers would make a hell of a difference in the Manchester School District. If, as some claim, that the healthcare is an awful lot more, because remember, the city is self-insured up to $250,000 per incident or per person. So if you happen to have, of the 28, including the mayor, 29, I think the mayor's on a salary, that might be different, I don't know. But in any case, 28 public representatives then. Of those 28 representatives, I don't know the numbers, but if you had 10, and 5 of those 10 have open heart surgery or have a leg removed. I mean, I don't want to be flippant about it, but major surgery, and it ends up being a $200,000 bill. Well, right now they're insured by the city, but what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that the city's paying it. The city's self-insured. It pays every penny of the doctor's bills and the medicine bills up to the number 250. When it gets to that number, the city does have an insurance policy that kicks in at anybody goes over to $250,000. So for all we know, on any given year, it could be $1 million. It could be $500,000. But even at the low number of 150 or 120 or 100, whatever that number that was quoted once, which really is the number for the policy, right? How much the equivalent amount would be to have a policy. It's just an imaginary number because the city's paying all of it anyway. But even at $150,000 cost to the city, I can't think of a rationale for continuing. Unless I can't think of a rationale for continuing with that program. I think it's a low-hanging fruit that the current board should just take a vote. As I understand, as I know, the board cannot vote to discontinue the program for itself this current session, but a vote could be taken by the board to discontinue it. It's not guaranteed by the charter, etc. So it could be changed by the school board. I think. Members of the school board somebody should propose and second it again and push this through, and let's have that anomaly gone, because it is clearly I think it rises to the level of being immoral for people to be to have health insurance and by the way, let me besides what I just said, we also have paraprofessionals. We have temporary employees. We have people on per diems who are subs, teacher subs, who we pay, less for a day than you can earn at Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's. And these people, some of them are in our schools for long periods of time. Months and even years. There have been sub teachers for long periods of time. They don't get health care. We have a lot of employees in our district that don't get health care. How come the elected officials get it? And the only thing I've ever heard is that, well, it's certain people, it attracts people. Frankly, I don't think that the group of people in the city who don't have health care or can't afford it are somehow the people we want to single out for public service. I don't think they should be excluded in any way, but it doesn't seem to me that we're getting the poorest of the poor to run for public office based on the fact that they're going to get health care. So that's something I'm going to make some phone calls on this topic in the coming weeks here, and see if we can take action on this once the summer is at an end. On another topic, there is something that's coming up tonight on the school board meeting, as I understand it, which has to do with the idea of having student reps on the representatives of the student body, which is done in many other municipalities. And so the idea would be that students' voices would be heard at subcommittee level and at committee level. And a proposal was agreed to that a committee to look into this and to, I think it is agreed in principle. The idea is how might it work and how should it be made up, and et cetera, et cetera. So Art Beaudry, who's the number two guy, the chairman of the board, the number two person after the mayor on the school board. He usually sets up subcommittees. It's his prerogative to do so, and so he set up a committee, and 4 students were chosen to be part of the committee. Now, to be clear, this is a committee to talk about what the student representatives on the school board will look like and how they'll be chosen in the future. There's some controversy around this topic because there were a group of young people called the youth organizing or young organizers. It's YOU. I forget what it actually stands for, but that group of young people have been coming regularly to City Hall, and they've been agitating outside of City Hall, outside of meetings. I don't mean physically outside the meetings. I mean when other times other than when meetings are on, to make this happen. and it happens that these young people, the majority of them are from African American or African or immigrant communities in the city. I don't know exactly the details of where they all are from, etc. But I know by having met them a number of times that they represent some of the minorities in our school community. And I think it was, I know Art Beaudry. I don't know where he stands in all of this, but I think it was just insensitive that when it came time to choose this group of young people to move forward with how this committee might look and how it might be shaped in the future, that the method that was used to find the student representatives was to call up the as I understand it, to call up the principal of each of the high schools and have them choose a student. Now, as I understand it, I was told the name of the young man, for instance, who's representing Central High School, and I couldn't think of a better of a greater kid. Just a kid. He's a young man, just a great young man. So it's nothing about him, and I presume that the individuals who were chosen from the other schools are probably as stellar a candidate as he is. The problem with it is that it's business as usual. So there's a chicken and egg thing that goes on here, which is that there are certain kids who are groups of kids who are often motivated, capable, ambitious, connected. They feel very comfortable in their school. At a young age, they're comfortable in their skins. They're respectful. They've got the whole package going, and it's awesome to see in a young man or woman of 16 or 17 or 15 for that matter. And you see it, and you think, what a great young man or woman. The problem is when you go back to the same well of the same dozen or half dozen kids in each of these schools, and you choose one of the chosen already to represent, then it's at very minimum there's a lack of sensitivity there, and I feel really bad that the group of young students who had spent a long time pushing in the city to have student voices heard on the school board, that the very ones who did most of the pushing for that were excluded when it came to choosing a committee. So I believe that this is an item that will come up for a vote tonight after the start of the school board meeting at 7 o'clock, and I'm hopeful that I think there's a proposal to maybe add somebody to the one of the original group to the committee, which in the end is just looking into how it should all be established. But it shouldn't be that difficult a topic, but it's a difficult topic in the city because there is an inequity and an unfairness around within our high schools. Most people are well intentioned and trying to do the right thing, and they often will take umbrage at somebody saying, "Hey, there's a problem there." But there is a problem there, and the fact that it's done by without intention doesn't excuse it. A time has come in the city of Manchester for Manchester schools to represent the broad spectrum of the students and the student body within those schools, and not just represent, have our schools sort of, be represented in such a way that they look like they were the Manchester high schools of 1945 or 50. Okay, so in that regard, I have to say that I was at a wonderful event at St. Augustine's Church in Manchester. I think it was Wednesday night of this past week, a week ago, 6 nights ago. And it was an interfaith service that was held by the New Hampshire Council of Churches. And so all or many of the churches in the state of New Hampshire were represented there, and civic groups. Um, and it had to do with immigration and uh, issues around immigration and exile and the immigrant community and refugees. And it was a wonderful event. There were people there from all as many faiths as you could name. There was a rabbi there from one of the local temples. There was somebody there from representing the Muslim community. There were people representing the various Christian churches in the New Hampshire in New Hampshire, in the Catholic Church in New Hampshire, etc. And this was a night of reflection, and people came up and gave testimony about their personal experiences or the experiences of friends of theirs. And I was left. I'm still moved by the things that I heard, and I couldn't. I found it. It was thought provoking. It was almost anger invoking at sometimes, because it could make you very cross to listen to some of the things that had gone on. And when we listened to people like a dad with a wife and three kids who has been held in custody by ICE for the last 5 or 6 months, and his young children are left to fend for themselves with their mother, who now can no longer afford the apartment they're in, and the whole thing is an absolute mess. And so when I read on the paper today or yesterday that now for the second year in a row we had federal immigration authorities and agents just yesterday on I-93 North, I-93 South, stopping vehicles and checking people for papers. I just think we've come to a sorry state in our country when this is the stuff that's going on. I've traveled widely around the world, and in the end, everywhere but my home country of Ireland, I was an immigrant of one kind or another, or a tourist, or whatever. And I've never, well, that's not true, but most people in most countries, you could travel a lot as an American citizen around the world. And you're not going to be stopped if you're traveling in Australia and be pulled over with a road check on the side of the street somewhere outside Darwin to see if you're a refugee coming from Papua New Guinea. You're not going to be stopped on the streets of England or the streets of Germany or Norway or and anywhere. There isn't a civilized country in the world that I can think of where there are road checks set up on a sunny afternoon on a holiday weekend with federal troops or officers stopping traffic and checking people's papers. I find it. I'm amazed that the average person on the street is not up in their arms and in anger about this. And how when I look at the population of our students in Manchester, and I look at the ones who came here, we have immigrants. There are many immigrants in Manchester, many immigrants in Manchester, who are here, who have arrived here legally and have come here legally. There are a lot of people from the Indian, from the Asian, from South Asia, from India, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, who are here, who are working, and they're working in businesses in the greater Manchester area or in Massachusetts, and they're immigrants. But they're here perfectly legally. There are people here there are others who are here as refugees. They're here legally. There are some who are here illegally. I think about the kids who go to school in Manchester, in our schools every day, who are now worried about, will dad be there when they get home in the evening? What's going to happen to mom? one of the people who gave evidence at the who testified at St. Augustine's Church on last Wednesday night was a young mother who has 3 children herself. I think there were 11 something and then 2 were the age of her 3 children. She's one of the dreamers, the DACA people, who she said, she doesn't know what her status is. She's lived here her whole life. She's from Mexico originally, but she doesn't remember anything about Mexico. She was a baby when she came here. Her 3 children are American citizens born in America. They go to school here in Manchester. And she said, when her 11-year-old daughter said to her some months ago, Mom, what's going to happen if, are you going to be deported? Are you going to be arrested? Will you be here tonight when I come home? She didn't know what to say to her 11-year-old daughter because she doesn't know what the answer is because we're playing politics with it. It's just unconscionable. And then we expect these kids to be inside in schools in Manchester and to go home and when they come in the following day to have their homework done, and they get measured alongside a kid who comes home to a family that's doesn't have any of those worries or issues, social, economic, political, or otherwise, and they still get measured in the same way. And people want to hold up. Them up as failing or as not meeting standards, etc. It's appalling, and the other thing I'd like to touch off of with your patience is this: there is an off button for anybody who cares not to listen. But I was watching a debate today going on online about the separating families. And the amount of ignorance, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about the diatribes and the nasty words that were said. I'm talking about the people who really just don't know what they're talking about. There were people saying, if they didn't come here illegally, then it wouldn't be an issue. Well, those people don't, if that's their response, they just don't understand what actually is going on. They don't know what international law is or what United States law is, and they're talking through ignorance and demonstrating their ignorance by saying if they didn't come here, then this wouldn't happen to them. Because, to be very clear, what we're talking about here is not the issue that was going on in 2014 when there was a period when there was a rush of unaccompanied minors, so children arriving at the borders and showing up and not having parents, etc. And it became it was a big problem in 2014. What we're talking about is a mother or a mother and father showing up at our border, seeking out a border agent at one of the legitimate crossings, walking up to the booth or to the office and saying, my name is whatever it is, and I'm here to seek a refugee status or asylum in the United States because I'm under threat of whatever it might be. If I bring my daughters back to my home country, they're going to be, they'll have FGM implemented on a female genital mutilation. Whatever it might be, they will be subject to forced marriage. Or there are gangs on our street back where we live who have said that, if my son who's 12 doesn't go out, get a gun and murder somebody down the street, that they will kill him. And I got out last week at midnight and left everything behind me because we had to leave. These people show up on our borders and they say we're seeking refugee status. Now, under international law and under U.S. law, those people, you can't just send. Excuse me. It's not as though you can just send them back like an economic refugee. By law, you're required to investigate as best you can whether this. Excuse me. Whether this person has got a legitimate claim or not, and so you can take them, you can put them in whatever. Well, the law requires that they be put in the least restrictive environment possible. So if they're a threat, or you think they're a threat or something, you can put them in a federal detention center. you could give them to Health and Human Services, and have the U.S. government can decide what the level of restriction they want to place on them is, and they can put them in whatever level of restriction they want. What they can't do is simply tell them, you're not coming in, get out of here, we don't even want to hear what you said. Because the other 198 sovereign countries in the world, all of them obey the law and take these people, contrary to what you'll hear on the streets of some idiot that might speak on Facebook or something, contrary to what they might say. The reality is, if you show up on a border of any country in the world and claim refugee status, then you're going to be accepted as a refugee for whatever length of time it takes to fathom out whether you are one or not. But what Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, of his own accord, or maybe at the direction of the President, I don't know, but Jeff Sessions gave instructions. He reinterpreted things and gave new instructions to ICE and to the Border Patrol back about 8 or 9 months ago. And under those instructions, we now separate the family. We take the children away from the parents. And the idea in doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is if that is, because that's such a terrible act. You walk up to the border of the U.S. with a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old baby in your arms, and the federal agents take your 4-year-old and 9-month-old and walk off with them and bring them off somewhere, and you don't see them again until whenever, and then you're put through the process. The thought is, by making it as horrendous as that, by doing family separation, that it will slow the number of people coming to the border. Now, even if that were effective, and it's not proving effective, what a dastardly, horrible, immoral, shocking to the conscience thing for the most powerful country in the world to do to the very poorest of people who approach it. I don't understand people of my persuasion, of the Christian persuasion, who learn about, the flight of Jesus and Mary and Joseph to Egypt in the face of Roman atrocities in Egypt. I don't understand how they can study their Bibles and read this stuff and yet not see that having federal agents separate children from their parents on our borders, that somehow that is okay. We got all kinds of buzzing going on here. Let me just I'm just appalled that it's going on, and I every Tuesday, one Tuesday a month now, we have the Indonesian refugees who've been here for 12 or 14 years or 15 years, whatever it is, who now once a month have to show up at the Norris Cotton Building in Manchester with tickets in their hands to fly back home to Indonesia. And they go before a judge every month. They have to, whatever job they have, whatever they're doing, they have to come over to Manchester and show up with their papers. If they ever make a mistake, if they don't show up, if their paperwork's not right, if they get a speeding ticket, if they do something wrong, if one of their kids does something wrong, then they'd fall out of the program automatically and get deported. And to see that going on, if you go to the Norris Cotton Building, I think it's the first Tuesday of the month, and to see the ICE agents there in their helmets and black fatigues and combat gear, and with fully armed, and with their Jeeps and SUVs, and to see that going on in downtown Manchester every month. I don't know where we've gotten to as a people, but I don't for a minute believe that any of this represents the thoughts and the ideas of the average man and woman and all the friends that I have in the city of Manchester and the people I meet every day at the supermarket or when I walk around the city. I don't believe for a minute that these people want this being done in their names. And I would suggest, if you want to go find, there was a judge last week who he had 3 members of the Department of Immigration before him, and he played a video of two or three children, who their response as their parent was being taken away, and you could hear them screaming and crying unconsolably. It was shocking to listen to, and the judge demanded that the immigration officers explain for what purpose, for what good was this being done? What possible motive could there be for doing this to a family? Why would you do that? And they didn't have an answer. And everybody in the courtroom was shocked into silence to hear the screaming of the children, as they were being taken away from their parents. And that's happening every single day right now. So I'm shocked by it. I'm actually just as shocked by the apathy and the fact that most people don't even understand the difference between illegal immigration, people coming over our borders illegally, and the different policy under the Trump administration through Jeff Sessions of doing family separation, which is just unconscionable and painful for any of us to have to witness. We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to talk briefly about, Senate Bill 193, which is the voucher program. I would suggest to people who are there's an article which is part of. Let me see where it comes from. It's by Paul Sands, and this is he refers to this is a Catholic view of this, and he refers to studies that have been done by Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, a Catholic university, and it's amazing to read this. And when he talks about the fact that that research would show that having government funds, taxpayers' dollars, donated to Catholic schools and used for Catholic schools has a terrible effect on the actual Catholic schools themselves, contrary to what you might believe. Because one of the things it says is that our work has shown, this is from the research from the team at Notre Dame, our work has shown that vouchers may cause a decrease in certain religious financial activities, he said. The expansion of vouchers in Milwaukee, according to the researchers, resulted in notable declines in church donations and church spending on non-education religious purposes. And notably, for the average church tract in the team's research, vouchers became a greater source of revenue than any other source, including from the worshippers of the church themselves. As the team's paper on their research states, the meteoric growth of vouchers appears to offer financial stability for congregations while at the same time diminishing their religious activities. There is no clear reasoning for this decline, which speaks to the fact that the voucher question is by no means answered. It is possible that the Archdiocese of Milwaukee is atypical, as the vouchers go directly to the schools rather than to the parents first. Students focusing on other dioceses may yield different results. So there's some very interesting reading in this research that goes against what was the stance of the Diocese of Manchester when it supported School Bill 193. So I'd suggest anybody who's interested in that topic to look at the results in Milwaukee of charter schools, and in particular Catholic schools, and the effect of using taxpayer dollars on them. Ladies and gentlemen, we were all over the place a little bit tonight because of various things going on. I thank you for paying attention again, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week on Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. Thank you, and good night from Jim O'Connell.